Hello, welcome to the Undeniable Podcast. I'm John Visgilio, CEO of Overabove. Today, we are exploring the evolving landscape of creativity in our tech-driven world. In today's episode, I'm thrilled to be chatting with a core group of our design team at Overabove about how the rise of AI is informing our creative process. Our team will share their insights in using AI as a valuable tool in their design process, including a fascinating packaging project where we created a family of labels for a craft brewery. But of course, we'll chat about the flip side too. AI isn't perfect, and it really comes down to the creative minds behind it. Ultimately, the success of AI hinges on human creativity and the vision of the designers themselves. You won't want to miss this thoughtful discussion on balancing innovation and artistry in this new era of creativity. All right, so kind of excited about having this conversation with you guys. I thought it would be great to have each of you kind of give us a little bit of your background, so many years you've been with Overabove, kind of your design background, your career in the industry, and then that kind of will set us up for what I hope is going to be a really interesting conversation around AI and this packaging project that we just recently completed. So let's go around the horn.
I've been with Overabove for almost 20 years now. My background, let's see, it started when I was at age 6, and I found my first comic. No, my background is, traditionally for graphic design. I graduated at UConn with a graphic design degree. It's not something I ever wanted to do, but I sort of found myself in that path when I tried out some web design and interactive in the art school, and I really liked it. And so that was my sort of pathway into interactive, and that was a long time ago when, Macintoshes were powered by steam engines. And it was a very long time ago. But that was my path into graphic design. And since then, I've worked at a couple places and landed at Overabove and have been here ever since.
Awesome.
My background is similar in that I was not planning on being a graphic designer. I started out wanting to be an artist and realized maybe that won't make me any money. And then I switched to illustration, and then I realized that was a tough industry to be in, and then I switched into graphic design, and I've been at Overabove probably for less than Mike, but maybe 18 years collectively.
Less than Mike. But you are currently a fine artist as well. So you found a path.
I try to be on the side. Yeah, little side hustle.
I've been designing for about 20 years, but probably with OA, I'm going to say 8, broken up, but around 8 to 10. I kind of always knew I wanted to be a graphic designer. I started working in Photoshop Elements at 14. I don't think I've ever stopped playing around on the computer. So I went to UConn and got a BFA in communication design and haven't stopped.
And now you're a graphic designer and doing all kinds of graphic communications for Overabove.
Yes.
Day in and day out.
Every day. No breaks.
Except Saturdays and Sundays.
Yes, except that.
Suze, you want to give us an overview?
Yeah, so, you and I, John, we go back for as long as we can remember, and we kind of got started off on the same path, high school, taking art classes together, then, going to UConn, graphic design. Then I ended up going off and pursuing more of a fine arts direction and got my MFA in printmaking and did a short stint teaching college and loved that. But at the time, it really was not that viable. So ended up working as a graphic designer again and cross paths with you again. And now it's been over 20 years that I've been at OA. So,
well, what's interesting is just in that little synopsis of all of our experience, it's so obvious that so much has changed so fast. And today's conversation is exactly that. It's and what we're going to try to tackle in this episode is that transformation, and exploring the new creative landscape that, is presenting all kinds of interesting opportunities for the creative industry. And specifically, we're going to talk about this project that I mentioned earlier for a beverage client, where we needed to do some, branding and packaging essentially for a couple of lines of business. And we were tasked with, developing these beer labels. Skiles, maybe it would be good if you could help set the stage and give us a sense for what the brief was from the client. What were they looking for? What did they need? And what was our mandate, if you will, creative mandate?
Yeah, sure. So the client's called These Guys, and it's a small brewery in Norwich, Connecticut. And they had come to us. They were just now getting into canning their beers, which is a real super big deal for a small brewery. So they're very excited about it. They had worked with another designer, had generated some labels, but they had a couple others that they wanted. They weren't necessarily thrilled with what they had gotten before, or just wanted to explore some different options. So they reached out to us, and basically that was the mandate. We want cool new labels, but it's really important for them to have a connection to their Norwich roots. So they kind of said, we'd love to have some kind of a connection there. It's really important. We're very involved in the community. So any kind of tie-in you can do there. We had a couple of calls, explored, where their sort of preferences were in terms of breweries can go a couple different ways. They can have each beer label be completely unique and have its own personality, or, a brewery can design their labels to have some consistency for all of their sort of varieties, right? So they definitely wanted each one to have its own sort of distinct kind of vibe. They wanted to have its own flavor, its own look and feel. They didn't necessarily need a connection, but they also wanted us to build some level of consistency in terms of layout. So they came to us and said, we just want something really cool. The names were pretty funny. They were cool. They were clever. And, they called for some really cool dynamic visuals.
So we didn't name the brews, obviously.
Yep.
But the names gave us some opportunity for creative thinking. And what I'd love to do is kind of talk about each of your individual approaches, and what was that creative inspiration, and kind of what concepts you wanted to explore. Beck, do you want to kind of go first? Just give us a sense for what you were thinking and what you were trying to get to.
Yeah, I think my name was pretty difficult initially to work with. The beer is called Effed Up on Pills. So it was trying to not be literal like pills, drugs. We were trying to stay away from that. So I focused on the experience, which I feel either could share. It's like the experience of being effed up, having a good time. So I went a more psychedelic route with the creative. Although I will say officially that I think my Pilsner Goddess that I came up with was pretty epic, and I wish they had gone with it. But
way cooler. But
you explored a goddess approach, and then you explored more of a psychedelic kind of experiential thing, right?
Yes. And that's eventually what they landed on. The other labels they were character based, so I did make the goddess character. I made a pirate character because Norwich is known for its like ties to pirates, and it said like effed up on his hands as a tattoo. Like, it was cool. But they loved the Pilsner glass with the hops in it, with this just psychedelic landscape behind it.
Okay. Kel, why don't you tell us about your initial approach and what concepts you kind of wanted to explore and figure out?
So when I also did the same effed up on pills, and was trying to figure out how to approach it because of the name. And I just started diving into the history of Norwich and found some info about this guy Leffingwell and the history of this tavern that, this building that still exists. It's this historical building that I think you can go visit. And it was back in the day. At one point, it was a tavern, and I thought, okay, so this relates. And so I don't know. I went down this weird road of
We like weird roads.
thinking about this like guy, and him being drunk, and having all these people at his tavern, and I thought maybe it would be fun to play off of that. So I went down this whole strange concept of having this like guy with this white wig, and
So you took kind of like a Revolutionary era Norwich fictionalized historical figure.
Yeah, I kind of felt like it kind of softened the name a little bit, like, because it was funny. So that was my favorite one that I had done. I did a couple others, but that were more like traditional. The other one that I did was relating to like old apothecary style.
Oh, that's right. You had the pill bottle.
Yeah, I did. I had the idea of using like kind of an old apothecary style like pill bottle and putting hops in it. So that was the other one that I worked on.
We'll come back to that because I want to talk a little bit about the environment that pill bottle found itself in, which was also generative AI. But Sue's like, what creative concepts did you want to explore, and how did you tackle it?
So I had the name Thames River Red, and I think, in, like Kelly said, I at first started with just trying to focus on the significance of the Thames River as an iconic, feature in Norwich, and that sort of history and that Norwich pride was kind of important to them. But then diving in with AI, was like the first time I really had ever started a project from scratch using AI. So I can't really say that I had a specific idea that I wanted to focus on. I was actually initially so enamored with like all of the styles I could get and all of the ideas I could generate so quickly that I just kind of ran through like all these ideas that popped into my head. And then if the AI spit out something that I thought was interesting, then I kind of focused in on that. So, a couple directions that I did were I had a character with a bearded guy focusing on this kind of like the red beard aspect with him standing in front of a river and holding a beer. I did a couple that tried to mimic sort of this historical landscape of the Thames River. And one in particular that I kind of liked was of a hot air balloon that had the name Thames River Red over it. And it was just sort of floating over this idyllic scene of the river.
Okay, cool. I want to come back to the river part in a minute because that's where we found some challenges with generative AI. And so we'll come back to that. But Skiles, tell me about your initial approaches and what did you want to explore and what labels did you kind of focus on?
Well, I did both Effed Up on Pills and Thames River Red. Effed Up on Pills, I had a pretty specific idea of what I wanted to do, which is kind of super weird, but I knew I wanted to have like a huge bloodshot eyeball. And then after exploring some things with AI, I was working on, and honestly, I got a lot of success with that right away because I knew exactly what I wanted, and it gave me exactly what, in terms of everything, style, visuals, all that. But then I added a couple other elements to it with AI, and I thought it was really cool how it just knew what I wanted for that one. The other one was a little bit more of a struggle with AI, but I got to exactly where, or close to where I wanted. I wouldn't say exact, but for the Thames River Red, I knew I wanted to like personify the name Thames River Red. Like I wanted Thames River Red. I wanted Red to be a guy, and I had this idea of what he would look like. So I used those prompts, put it in, and some fighting and arguing back and forth with the robot. I landed on something that I was fairly happy with.
And what tools did you guys really lean into?
ChatGPT and the DALL-E feature.
Okay.
Yeah, we did. Actually, everybody did three of some of the most major generative AI image generators. DALL-E was one of them, and that's the one that most people used a lot of. And then I actually used Midjourney also.
So if I step back, look, you get a pretty seasoned team here. Why not use a traditional illustrator? And what would that have been like, using a traditional illustrator versus using generative AI the way we have?
Well, it's interesting because, as you said, we go back in this industry so long that, there was a time, and as, I'm not an illustrator myself, having a concept like that, you would have to hire an illustrator and you would have to work out concepts and sketches. And, it's a pretty involved, lengthy process. First of all, not only that, but you have to identify a specific style you want, because generally illustrators are adept in a certain style. So you don't really get to explore a lot of styles all at once. So you kind of have to know, you have to really be clear about your vision.
And you'd be reviewing illustrators' work to identify an illustrator who best emulates the kind of concept or feel or vibe that you're looking for.
And I think that there's just been such a shift in the last several years anyhow with, stock photography sites, and that, companies hiring illustrators, it's very rare nowadays because of the cost associated with it too. So, the quicker we can come up with an idea, we can present lots of ideas. That makes it more cost effective for a client, obviously. I can't say that it's the preferred approach or that it's a better approach, but it seems to be the way of things these days.
Just to add to Sue's, a whole other part of the process would be the concepts, like the idea. So you'd have to communicate those ideas to the client somehow, and for that you'd need a series of thumbnail illustrations, little sketches and stuff. So you end up getting, quick little sketches that you're not really sure how they're going to be rendered. You hope that they're going to be rendered a certain way, which, kind of similar to what you're doing with AI too, because you're not exactly sure what you're going to get. But you have to communicate the process for that. Then you have to do rough sketches, get that approved, and have the illustrator work on it, and then get that kind of approved. And then you go into revisions, which is,
there's a cost barrier, there's a time barrier,
huge.
There's a creativity barrier to a certain extent. And if you throw in a client in there, and the idiosyncrasies associated with subjectivity and likes and dislikes and all that kind of stuff. Whereas with generative, with the right prompts and the right creative input, you're actually able to see something pretty quick, which gives you the ability to pivot or dive in, like Sue, the way you were talking about. It seems like you really used a platform to help enhance your creativity and your creative approach and your creative thinking. You were using a lot of stuff as a spark maybe for an idea.
I also see, if you were to go the way of a traditional illustrator, that, AI could really help you generate those ideas, because like Mike said, as much as you get something fairly good from AI, I will say that it's not perfect. And I didn't think it was perfect. And there were definitely things about it, even though I was generally happy with the outcome. If I had been working with an illustrator, I could have made it perfect. I could have gotten every detail exactly the way I wanted it. And that was something that was a little frustrating with the AI, is that, you got it close, but then, you wanted to tweak this or that, and you really couldn't do it, whereas if you were working with an illustrator, you could be that specific.
Can you think of an example of not perfect?
Yeah, like sometimes the placement of elements wouldn't be exactly where you wanted it. Maybe, the style of something or the shape of something wasn't just right. the AI might have put something in that you couldn't really get it to remove. Now, of course, you could go in and you could use Photoshop and other tools to do that. But again, that there's a certain level of skill to doing that. And you also can only do so much with what you have to work with. So
anybody else have an example there?
I do. My guy was paddling a canoe, and AI did a really cool rendering of him, but he was holding one side of a canoe paddle in one hand and another side in another hand. So two different paddles. It was really weird. And I'm like, no, that's not a canoe paddle. I want him holding a canoe paddle. And every time it was like a broken paddle, a little paddle. So if I told a person that, they would have known, or they wouldn't have given me that in the first place. They would have been like, no problem. You want a canoe paddle. So we fought a lot. I actually left AI for a while and said, I need a break. I'll talk to you tomorrow.
You broke up a little bit.
I said, I can't do this with you anymore. And every revision actually moved the illustration further away. And it was so frustrating. So frustrating.
Well, tell me about the art of the prompt, because that's ultimately, well, I guess it's two things that we're kind of talking about here. One is giving it a prompt and not getting the result. Weird things in weird places, not what you're asking for. So there's challenges in the platform. And then the other is the art of the prompt itself. Like, how were you able to actually work around some of those obstacles to ultimately get what you wanted? And how did you design your prompts or think about your prompts or whatever to get there?
I think it's just writing a really nice descriptive paragraph at first, and then you can modify after. What I found most useful is that even if I wrote like 2 sentences, something really short, like I wasn't quite sure exactly what I wanted, once it made the first iteration, I could click on info and AI already wrote this huge descriptive paragraph. So basically what I did is copy and pasted it and then went in and tweaked little things like if I wanted a certain background to be slightly different, I could make adjustments, and then it kind of was like rinse and repeat. I just wanted to see what it would give me when I resubmit that prompt. So that was kind of how I got around things. But you also have to make sure you're at the end, you're putting the right aspect ratio that you want, or else you'll get like a vertical format, and that's not what we needed. So it is a little bit of a learning curve in the beginning, but once you get the hang of it, you can really make what you want.
What other prompt strategies did we use? Kel, could you think of something that, you hit a brick wall and you couldn't get out of, or you found a certain way to develop a prompt that got you closer to what you wanted?
I was apprehensive, honestly, about the whole thing, but also like amazed at what it would come up with. So to a point, like it was like if I put something in and it would start, like I put in symmetrical, just because I wanted the design, his face to be symmetrical, and it did all kinds of cool things that were symmetrical, and I was like, all right, that seems like a magic word because that's giving me really cool stuff. But yeah, I didn't really hit a lot of brick walls, I would say, but if there was something within the art that I wanted to change, I felt like a good workaround was just to ask it to create an element on a white background, and then with my jerry-rigged ways, I could just Photoshop it in. So that was just like a workaround, I feel like.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's a good workaround. Because what I did was, I was talking with Sue about this while we were working together, is if you click into the image, there's like a little painter's tool, and you can highlight things you want to change and prompt it to fix it. But if you didn't highlight anything and you just asked it to change something, you would get a whole new image, not even what you were asking it to fix. So you can kind of get yourself into a hole in that way. But it was useful once you learn how to do it properly.
Skiles, do you find anything?
For sure. Repetition in my prompts usually worked really well. I had been using...
You were basically yelling at the platform is what you were doing.
Yeah.
We're using all caps.
Yeah, it's just hammering it over and over and over again. But no, I find like if something's important to me for the outcome, I will say it a couple times in different ways. And just like on mine, the Thames River Red, I probably said red beard several times. Like one time I said raging red beard, crazy red beard, or something like that. And it was like facing camera in front of, canoe, that kind of thing. And I would just repeat it over and over in one prompt. And it seemed to understand that that's important to it. Whereas if I was more sort of wishy-washy, it would give me whatever, it would fill in the blanks. And I mean, I think that's one of the biggest challenges I find working with AI is if you have a distinct concept, great. But if you have a distinct sort of visual aesthetic you're going for, you might be disappointed because it's not, no matter how much you say, I want it in the watercolor sketch kind of style or this, it's probably not going to give you exactly what you want. But that's the concession, right? That's what you have to give a little for it.
Versus the traditional illustrator,
illustrator,
where you could
right.
say, if you wanted a woodcut, you're going to get a woodcut.
Yep, I know. I hired you because you have this style. I know exactly what I'm going to get for aesthetic. I'm going to give you a thumbnail of the layout. Maybe I'll have you do thumbnails. We'll work on that. And then I know that what I'm going to get from you is exactly what we hired you for.
Anything particularly frustrating other than some of the things that we talked about? Like anything that you just couldn't get the platform to do?
Many times.
Yeah,
many times. Like, for example, on the character that I was creating of this man, he kept coming out with the wrong amount of fingers. And I would go in and keep asking it to fix it. And it would then give it an extra finger or take away too many fingers. Or sometimes it would just cover his hand with something else. It actually, I felt like, and I have felt this in general, and even with other projects that we've worked on since this project, that at least my experience was that the more that I kept prompting it, the worse the image got.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times what I would do is I would just kind of like X out of the prompt chat and I would start all over again, fresh. The downside of that, though, was that like maybe you'd get something better, but you definitely wouldn't get what you had made better.
Nope.
You'd get a totally new interpretation of it. It was frustrating if you generally liked what you had, but you wanted to make little tweaks to it because it just seemed to get continually worse.
Yeah.
So
I never got my canoe paddle. I never got my canoe paddle.
Even when you walked away, they didn't provide the canoe paddle?
No, we had a big fight and it wouldn't give it to me. So if you look at my label, my solution was cropping the canoe paddle out. I said, screw it. I don't need it. I don't need you.
We don't need your stinking canoe paddle.
No.
I mean, I got gaslit by AI. Working on the posters for these guys, I had a snowy scene where, the subject kind of like got into a skiing accident, but you could see his face. I didn't want to see his face. And I said, cover his face with snow. And it would give me a new image of a new face and say, here's your new image with his face covered in snow. And I was like, that's not what I said. Like, so it just kept lying to me and saying that it was doing what I asked, but it didn't. So that I can say, like, that's same with Mike. Like, it's just a bit frustrating.
That kind of brings me to another question I've been thinking about. You guys are all seasoned graphic designers, and you're combining image and topography to build this family of beer labels. You've got to add topography to it. And as I remember the process, we had some challenges there. So the question is, how do you combine your talent as a graphic designer with all the elements that are necessary for this project within the context of the limitation of AI or the potential of AI, what, at both ends of the spectrum. Like, how did you overcome the limitations, or how did you maximize the potential as it relates to graphic design, typography, that kind of stuff?
I did use ChatGPT or DALL-E to generate the image, but then I actually used Firefly in Adobe to open space up, which is probably every designer's favorite feature in the new Photoshop, or Firefly is the generative fill. So you can open it up. The format wasn't right. I had an image that I loved, but I needed the format different. I needed more space up top because I wanted to insert my own typography. So I did use it for that, but not the generate type.
How did you guys maintain the kind of human touch that is necessary? It's one of the things that I think is fascinating about where we are in this industry. And we've seen a lot of transformation. I mean, when Sue and I started in this business, we didn't have Macs. My first job, I was introduced to a Macintosh. I mean, we did layout and paste up and whatever. So we've seen this massive transformation. I think we're in that same sort of wave. And the question is, for me, always, well, how do we're humans. Things matter to humans. There's emotion and logic. And as communicators and marketers, we have to be conscious of that human touch. So how did you make sure that we didn't end up with some sort of plastic, digital, generative, not so deep kind of thing, but we're able to maintain that human touch?
I think it's kind of dependent on the style that you choose, because I do think that if you don't really give the AI a specific prompt of a style, it's going to give you a style that looks very AI, right? Like, and I don't know what that means per se, but there's like a look to it, and it all looks the same. So it almost made it so that you had to pick like a different style, whether you wanted it to look, like a woodcut, or you wanted it to look, antiqued, or, you wanted it to look psychedelic or something. Like, if you didn't really give it something like that, then I think what you're saying is true. It loses that kind of human touch, and it all just starts looking the same.
So it's really the traditional art director or creative director saying, this is the vision, this is my vision, these are the prompts that inform that vision, and then battling it out, if you will, to get to the ultimate, rendition of that idea. Where would you say your individual creativity was crucial in elevating the visuals? Like, where were there moments?
I think it's just the overall idea. And that links back to your, that last conversation of adding the human touch to it. I wanted to test out, when I first started playing with AI, what AI would come up with was saying, hey, I have a beer label named F'd Up on Pills. What would you show as a label? And it gave its own idea without me adding anything else to it. Of course, it did literal pills. And it's not what I wanted at all. But I wanted to see what it would give me. So I think it's our input and finessing of the dialogue is what gives it the human touch. And then also I think it's just the idea behind it. Like with the Pilsner Goddess, like I wanted someone to go on a journey and have that experience. I don't know if AI would think of that on its own. That's the humanness of it. Like, I know it might be a little strange, but I'm like, we as humans, we have like spiritual experiences. I wanted it to feel that way. Like, AI is not going to have a spiritual experience, but humans can. So it's exactly our input into AI that gives it its humanity. And then we add even more human touch to it, and more of what we do every day with our graphic design is adding the typography, making it match our compositions and have it feel cohesive.
Yeah, and to that, it's also knowing that the image that you create evokes emotion. So it's like that it's got to start with the human, the visual, the direction that is necessary. And ultimately, it's got to make the consumer feel a certain way. So you're right, Becky. I mean, it's like you can't just, you can't just lean into it and it's going to solve all problems. It's not human. It's not thinking. It's not, well, maybe it will be sentient. And some may argue that it already is sentient.
I mean, I feel like you need to know different styles in order to,
Yeah.
you need to already be an artist, graphic designer, visionary type person that is familiar with different styles. And, if you want it to look like woodcut or watercolor, or
Yeah.
you have to know all those
You got to have that vision.
options. Yeah.
Hey, how did you collaborate as a team? Like, what was the process of collaboration?
A lot of it was just helping each other out with trying to figure out prompts and like just what to do in general.
I mean, same as every project we work on. We Zoomed each other and talked and shared and, oh, check this out. This is crazy. Look at this. Definitely, I think some input from others. I mean, just like everything we work on, and we all understood, there's only so much you can do for revisions with it. But, it was just honestly the whole team working on AI image generation as a main part of our project. Everybody was kind of mesmerized at first and just like, oh my God, this is crazy. Look at this, what we're coming up with and stuff, and just sharing the entire process, just like every job.
You reminded me of something that we mentioned earlier. One of the pitfalls, if I remember correctly, is that when you were trying to make a connection to Norwich, make a connection to the geography, you're using the Thames River as an example, and I think, Sue, you had one. But what the platforms were doing was going to the Thames, or the River Thames, because it's a far more, iconic, more well-known Thames, pronounced differently, but right. So that happened. We couldn't really actually get a historically accurate or geographically, topographically accurate image of the Thames.
Right. That's true. I actually had to tell it to give me, the prompt I kept using was like a New England river, so that it would at least generate landscape and that looked familiar. But of course, we wouldn't ever be able to say that this actually is the Thames River.
Yeah. And Kel, on the flip side, you had kind of an environment, an apothecary environment with your pills version. That was totally AI generated, correct? It was kind of atmospheric, but it was relatively successful in being able to kind of create an environment, a background environment, right?
It was. It like totally got what I was going for. That like really, there wasn't much struggle with that one at all. Because I wanted the background to be soft and almost feel like that this little pill bottle could be sitting on a bar, or it could be sitting on like the bar of an old pharmacy.
That's cool.
And the coloring was cool too. I honestly didn't ask for certain coloring, but the mood of it was really cool, the colors it used.
So if you were to think about everything that we've discussed and the project as a whole, well, first, do you believe or think that using AI or leaning into AI allowed us to push the boundaries, or was it a hindrance that you were able to overcome, or was it a pain in the ass and you wouldn't do it again? Where does it fall in that continuum?
Yeah, I don't think anything else would have been an option for this client. What they wanted, what they needed. I think we had a sense that the traditional illustration was probably out of budget, take too much time, and wouldn't give us options. It would set us into only one path. So I think we knew that for this, it was a really good fit.
And you could push the boundaries.
Yeah, in other projects, this may not be a good fit. Like we've got another request from a client coming up with the rendering of an image into illustration, and I know the AI is not going to work because it can't accurately render what you want. It will be very important to render something accurately in this illustration that we're going to be doing. And I know from experience that AI won't do that. So we have to go a more traditional route for that.
I felt like it was really successful at helping you generate a lot of ideas quickly. And my first experience with it on this project was, I would say, primarily good. I tried using it afterwards for some other things, and I feel like it wasn't as successful. And, I had actually read an article shortly after we did this project that there is a lot of people talking about how AI actually currently is getting worse, not getting better, because it remembers all of these images that it creates, all of these bad images that it creates, and it goes back into its memory or whatever. And so they're saying that actually it's in a way it's getting worse. So there might be some, time for, it to kind of work itself out, and for there to be some perfecting in the way that it's handling the prompts. I don't know. It's just interesting that I had seen that article and I had just had that experience. Like, I was getting really frustrated. I was like, why isn't this working the way it was on that first project? Like, I felt like I was putting in prompts and it was generally giving me what I asked for. Whereas the second time around, I was like, this is trash. Like, I couldn't even use any of the images.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
This project was just, because it was such a kind of wild, get crazy with the artwork. It was a good use of AI for sure. You wouldn't be able to create these illustrations using stock, even if you pieced it together, really. And also, I feel like AI is just like an invitation to put strange elements in odd environments, you just can't help but want to try and put a pink elephant in Central Park, or I think we all were doing that when we first started playing with it, just what kind of bizarre image can I create?
I think it was also necessary because there were already labels created that had this look and feel, and we weren't going to match that and keep consistency with the branding or the look and design of what they already had without this. So I think it was kind of necessary that we went this route.
That makes sense. So I'm going to kind of wrap up with a couple of additional questions. We kind of talked about disadvantages using AI in the design process. I think we've covered that really well. And I think to a certain extent, you've talked a bit about how this project may have influenced future projects. You've actually, like Sue, you just talked about how it wasn't a great fit for the second project. So this follow-on project for another client. So I guess maybe in summary, would be really interesting for each of us to talk about, if you were going to talk to another graphic designer, whether part of our firm or not, somebody in the industry who may be considering or may be exploring, what advice would you give them right off the bat?
Yeah, so I think I'd say, absolutely use it. It's super helpful as a tool for a lot of smaller things like image tweaks, generative fill, removing things from imagery, stuff like that. But I think the most important lesson that I've learned, and something that I got hammered in on me when I was in school by a couple professors, was, and what Becky said earlier, was that concept is king, right? It's the idea is what's going to make your thing unique. If you have, so I was the illustration major for a little while, and I didn't have the best technical skills in the class, but I had really good ideas. And my professor loved the stuff I did because she's like, just keep going with that and come up with good ideas. Composition was cool, layout was cool. And even though I didn't render exactly what I wanted from myself, the idea was cool and it put my stuff, pretty high up there. And, but I wasn't that great, so I got out of that gig pretty quick. But that's the driver, right? If you've got a distinct idea, AI could probably help you. But if you have a distinct aesthetic and vision, then you probably are going to be disappointed. So I think it's just finding that middle ground, and also, time and money is also important, right? So that's going to drive a lot of it. A lot of it comes down to time and cost. And, if you're going to be satisfied with what it gives you because it's quick and less expensive, and you have to be okay, but not want exactly what you're looking for, then that's fine. But if you got the distinct aesthetic, and it's very important in this case, then it's probably going to disappoint you.
Kel, what are your thoughts?
I feel like it's a great shortcut. It gets rid of the back and forth between. I mean, you can take the fast road, right, to decide which style is going to work, which, you can just play with a whole bunch of things within an hour and decide on a style or, so in that way, it's really great.
Beck, what about you? What advice would you give?
I would say AI is a tool and not a human replacement. Basically. I mean, the AI is nothing without our creative mind, especially with what we do.
Perfect. Suze, what about you?
I think I might just touch back on what Kelly had said earlier, which is, if you're going to delve into this world of AI, you absolutely have to have an open mind, and just be willing to, maybe be happily surprised and also know that you might be disappointed. So I think, just going into it with an open mind.
Great conversation, you guys. Really enjoyed it. Really interesting challenges, opportunities, lots of potential, some pitfalls. But thanks for the conversation. That was really, really fun. Thanks a lot.